Well, good morning, welcome. Happy Mother's Day, moms. Come on, moms, we're so glad you're here. Let's give our moms another big round of applause. Moms, you're awesome. Moms, you're amazing. We wouldn't be here without you. That's not just an understatement, that's the truth. And so we're so thankful for moms. If you're a mom, we're thankful for you, thankful for so much of what you pour into us to help us to become who God created us to be. And so thank you. My mom texted me before service, and so I know she's watching. So hey mom, happy Mother's Day. I know you're up in Indiana, I love you. And remember, I'm the favorite child because I can say this in front of thousands of people, all right? Happy Mother's Day, mom. All right, give my mom a round of applause. Oh, it's so good to be with you. You have your Bibles. We're going through the Gospel of Matthew. We're in chapter 8 as we're looking at some miracles that Jesus is performing. I want to encourage you to go ahead and open your Bibles, open your phones, and we're going to jump in there in just a moment. As you're finding your spot, let me ask you a couple of questions. Have you ever been in one of those moments in life where you felt all alone? Where you were going through some huge crisis? Maybe it was a marriage that was falling apart. Maybe it was a prodigal child. Maybe your business was crumbling or your job was failing. Maybe it was a diagnosis of cancer. Maybe you're struggling through a season of depression. Maybe you're a senior in high school or a senior in college and you're just overwhelmed trying to figure out what's next. Maybe you're wrestling with an addiction, or maybe you're staring down the path of an adult parent who's going to need your undivided attention, and you know the inevitable outcome. And you feel like it's you versus fill in the blank. Or maybe you know you're not alone. Maybe you know God is with you, but you're wondering, will he? You're wondering, can he do anything about the storm you find yourself in? Listen, here's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing just about every one of us in this room has found ourselves in that boat. And you found yourself in that place, and you're watching these waves continue to crash against the side of your boat, and you're just wondering when that wave is going to come that's going to ultimately just knock you completely over. Well, today we're going to look at one of the most famous, the most loved of Jesus's miracles, where Jesus calms the storm. And this is going to fill us with so much hope as we see Jesus do what he does and do it in such a marvelous and magnificent way. But this is also going to provide a little bit of a pause, because we're going to say, yes, Jesus has the power to command the storms, to calm the storms. But what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't fix my marriage? What if he doesn't heal my disease? What if he doesn't bring my child home? I mean, is he good? Does he have the power? I mean, why does he seem to take care of her storm and not my storm? Why does he keep his boat from sinking but not my boat? Is there something wrong with my faith? And so as we jump into chapter 8, verse 23, we have been seeing all the way through the Gospel of Matthew that Matthew is trying to make a very clear point to every audience that read it in the first century to all the way here today in 2025, making sure we know that Jesus is the promised king and he's ushering in his kingdom. And he's been showing us what it looks like to walk this kingdom out. He gave us the right interpretation through the Sermon on the Mount, and then he walked off that mountain and he began to immediately put that teaching into practice. And we've seen him do that through some unlikely people. Three unlikely miracles. We began with this leper who came to Jesus, then this centurion, then Peter's mother-in-law. And we see Jesus has the authority and the power to be able to heal the sick. Today we're going to see him have the ability and power to control the elements in nature and creation. And next week we're going to see Jesus has the power to cast out demons. You see, miracles authenticate the message and the messenger. And so Jesus is authenticating that he is the promised king. And what we're going to see today is Jesus is focusing his attention on the 12. He's focusing his attention on these guys who've been following along with him and seeing these miracles, so seeing what has happened with the leper, seeing what has happened with the centurion, seeing what has happened with Peter's mother-in-law. And now Jesus is going to bring all of this into focus for them because he's after one thing. These first three miracles all have one thing in common. It's faith. It's faith. The faith of that leper to come to Jesus, are you willing? The faith of the centurion, just speak it, just say the words. I've never seen a faith like this. Peter's mother-in-law, three unlikely people show this incredible level of faith. And so what is faith? I mean, faith is more than just believing. It's more than just belief. I mean, faith is having a trust. It's having a complete confidence in someone or something. But faith isn't just some intellectual pursuit. It's not something that you just do in your mind. It might begin here, but it moves to here. Eventually, it's going to move to here. Faith elicits a response. Faith elicits a reaction. Faith elicits an action. In 1960, there was a French tightrope walker by the name of Charles Blanton. And Charles decided he was going to create a spectacle. And so what he did is he went to Niagara Falls and he put a rope all the way across the falls, connecting America and Canada. He let everybody know what he was about to do, and the crowds came from both sides, both countries, to watch this daredevil, to watch this tightrope walker. And he began that very first pursuit across that tightrope, walking all the way across it, balancing all as he goes, and the crowd was oohing and awing and applauding every step of the way. And he makes it across, and he does his, thing, and the applause of the crowd comes, and then he turns around and he walks back again. And he's walking back, and each time he does this, each pass across this high wire, he makes it more and more difficult. He drops his balancing stick. He starts to carry something else. He puts a blindfold on, and he's walking and walking across, and the crowd is getting even more excited as they watch him time after time after time again walk across this high wire, across Niagara Falls. And then he gets to the pinnacle of his act, and he gets a wheelbarrow, and he puts a sack of potatoes in the wheelbarrow, and then he goes to that high wire, and he walks across that high wire with a wheelbarrow and a sack of potatoes. And he gets across to the other side, and the crowd is clapping. They're just so excited watching what is going on. And he cries out to the crowd, "Do you believe I can do it again?" And they're like, yeah, you can do it again. We believe. And then he asks the crowd this question: then who's willing to get in the wheelbarrow? And you can imagine crickets. Nobody wanted to get in the wheelbarrow. You see, that's what Jesus is going to be teaching us. It's more than just believing, it's getting in the wheelbarrow. I mean, this is the kind of faith that Jesus is looking for. And so as he is teaching his disciples have seen this wheelbarrow kind of faith in a leper, in a centurion, in Peter's mother-in-law. Now Jesus is going to direct his attention to his 12 because he knows that they have to develop this wheelbarrow kind of faith, because if they don't, in the days, the weeks ahead, what he is about to give them, what he's about to entrust them, it will not be enough. And so Jesus is going to allow the elements. He's going to allow the conditions to bring these disciples to the end of themselves so that they can develop a get in the wheelbarrow kind of faith. And so let's jump in, and we're going to read all 5 of the verses that we're going to look at today, and then we'll come back and talk about those verses. It's captured in Matthew chapter 8, beginning in verse 23, and here's what Matthew records on the Sea of Galilee. Then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. And suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake, with waves breaking into the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." Jesus responded, "Why are you afraid? You have so little faith." And then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. The disciples were amazed. Who is this man, they asked. Even the winds and the waves obey him. And so on the surface, this is a well-known miracle. It's a well-known story. Odds are, if you were a kid, your parents read the Bible to you at bedtime, you had one of those little kid picture Bibles, and this was a miracle in there. Or maybe you're a parent reading to your kids, and you open up the picture Bible, look at the life and teachings of Jesus, and you've shared the story. You've gone to vacation Bible school, and you talked about this story of this storm, this story of the disciples, this story of their fear, and this story of Jesus shushing the storm. And we go, man, that's a great, great story, but do we really need 35 minutes on this, Pastor? Is there more to this than just meets the eye? It seems pretty straightforward. It seems pretty simple, but let me tell you, there is so much buried in these 5 verses. And so let's begin uncovering the incredible treasure that happens in this miracle. And what I want to do today is I want to cover a little bit from the Gospel of Matthew, but I'm going to bounce over to Mark chapter 5. And if you're taking notes, you want to write that down, Mark chapter 5, because Mark gives us a little bit of extra context to what's going on. This is also captured in the Gospel of Luke. All 3 of these Gospels capture this moment. And so let's jump into this and see if we can understand a little bit more of what's happening here. Verse 23, then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. That's what Matthew records. But listen to what Mark says. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. On the count of 3, say other side. 1, 2, 3. So what's the other side? What is on the other side? Why is the other side such a big deal? And let me just take a couple of moments to set up this week, but also begin to set up next week as Jesus is explaining what this other side is all about. And so if you remember back in the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, after Jesus gave us the Beatitudes, he then said to all those listening, you are to be the salt of the earth, you're to be the light of the world. And those are not new words. Jesus is actually quoting right out of Leviticus, calling them out to be exactly who God designed them to be, that they were supposed to be this kingdom of priests. They were supposed to be set apart. They were supposed to be distinct. They were supposed to look different than everybody else. This was a different kind of kingdom. And so here comes Jesus, bringing this kingdom. And this whole kingdom thing, it's about a community of people who are obeying their king in order to let this kingdom rule. You are bringing a light to the king and his kingdom. And so remember, at the beginning of what Jesus has been teaching us, this has been the call. And so when Jesus looks to his disciples there on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, right outside the city of Capernaum, and he says, let's go to the other side. The word other side, those words were code. They were code for a place that they would not mention, they would not even say. It was code for an area known as the Decapolis. The Decapolis. Now you might remember as we've been going through the study of Matthew where Jesus is doing a lot of his ministry is around the Sea of Galilee, the city of Capernaum. And you might remember there was a group of people who left Jerusalem and what was happening there to move up north. They were known as the Hasidim. They were the pious ones. There were a bunch of zealots and Pharisees, and they decided they wanted to become so holy, but what they did is they removed themselves from all the people that needed this holy message. But back in Jerusalem were all these people known as the Herodians, people that were Jewish but accepted all the Greek and Roman practices, and they didn't look distinct. And so you have these two opposites happening here. And so Jesus says, let's go to the other side. It was code for this region known as the Decapolis, Deca, 10 cities that Alexander the Great built when he and his empire rose. And these cities were then passed on to the Romans. And so what was happening in the Decapolis in these 10 cities, it was awful. It was all the pagan worship. It was all the pagan rituals. It was all the pagan things. In fact, the big 3, adultery, idolatry, and bloodshed was all happening in these cities. And so every good Jewish boy and girl knew to stay away from these cities. Like, this is not good. This was the personification of evil. I mean, the Decapolis would not even be mentioned. They would not eat the food from the Decapolis. I mean, they would never, ever even dream of going there. I mean, this is where you're sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories. That was the place. It was always the scary place. And so no Jewish person would ever go to the Decapolis. They would never go to this evil, evil place. And here is Jesus now looking at his disciples say, come on, guys, let's get into the boat. We're going to the other side. And you can imagine in that moment, these disciples are looking at one another like, what did he just say? We don't go there, Jesus. We've been taught that since we were little kids. That's a no-go. That's a stay away. That is no bueno. We don't go over there, Jesus. Are you sure? You can imagine just the beads of sweat beginning to form on their head as Jesus now is inviting them to get in the boat and go to the other side. And what Jesus is doing is Jesus is calling them out of their comfort zone. I mean, even getting in that boat is going to take a gigantic step of faith. And here's the truth about Jesus. Jesus calls you to the boat, not the comfort zone. It's easy to stay on dry land. It's easy to be in those places where it don't require you to take a risk or to get in the wheelbarrow, but Jesus says that's not where I want you to be. And so the very personification of evil is this place known as the Decapolis. And Jesus says, get in the boat, guys. We are going there. We're going to the other side. And you can only imagine this moment. These guys are beginning to feel uncomfortable. You can only imagine the tension beginning to build inside of them because they know they are going someplace that they should not be. They're going to a bunch of people they should not be around. They're going to the brokenness of this world, and man, they are feeling super uncomfortable, and the tensions are beginning to build. I mean, just stepping in that boat with Jesus to go on the Sea of Galilee to the other side would have created fear. Would have created fear. They were already terrified. And so here they are nervous. Here they are already concerned. It's nighttime. They're going on the Sea of Galilee. They're heading someplace they know they shouldn't be. And so this tension is beginning to build. And remember, at this point, these disciples have been bystanders watching other people's faith. They've witnessed the faith of the leper. They've witnessed the faith of the centurion. They've witnessed the faith of Peter's mother-in-law. But now Jesus is challenging them. The faith I need you to have, the faith I need to grow in you cannot be a borrowed faith. It's got to be your own. I mean, yes, those people got in the wheelbarrow, but how about you guys? And so Jesus invites them into the boat, and now he's going to permit the conditions that are going to bring these disciples to the end of themselves and force a decision. Are they going to get in the wheelbarrow? So listen to what happens next, verse 24. It says, suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with waves breaking into the boat. On the count of three, say fierce together. 1, 2, 3. It's interesting, all three of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that record this story, all use the exact same word, fierce. It was a fierce storm, and the Greek word for that is seismos. Seismos, which you might recognize another word we got for that in English, seismic. And when we use the word seismic, we're usually describing earthquakes. And so as these authors are describing this storm, it is an earth-shaking level storm. This is a Cat 5 level storm. This is not an ordinary storm. And if anybody knew about storms, it's these guys who grew up on this lake, grew up on the waters of the Sea of Galilee. They knew, but this was no ordinary storm. Which brings us to maybe something to consider. Maybe it was an ordinary storm. Maybe there is an enemy, a king of another kingdom, who saw Jesus coming. Maybe this place, the Decapolis in these 10 cities, which was the place of evil, maybe the evil one, the king of this world, maybe he saw Jesus coming. Maybe he saw this kingdom being brought, this kingdom of peace being brought to this kingdom of this world. Maybe he saw the Prince of Peace making his way there. Maybe he saw Jesus coming to bring his gospel and his kingdom there. And so just maybe, the enemy created the storm. And maybe that's why Jesus rebuked this storm. We don't know, but here's what I know, and maybe this is what you've experienced in life. Sometimes it feels like you're in the boat with Jesus doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're rolling away, you're going the right direction, you're behaving the way you're supposed to behave, you're doing all the things that he wants you to do, going exactly where he wants you to go, but it feels like you're just bumping up against a wall. Maybe it feels like maybe just the wind and the waves are just pushing against you. And you're like, what gives, Jesus? I'm going exactly where you told me to go. I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. Why in the world am I experiencing this pushback? And the reason we're experiencing pushback is because our enemy doesn't want to give up an inch of territory. And when you have these two kingdoms that are competing, these two kings that are competing, this king of this world, this king of chaos, doesn't want to give up a single inch to the Prince of Peace, who's bringing another kingdom in. And so just maybe there's something greater going on here. Maybe there's a deeper picture happening here. Maybe Jesus has got a deeper thing in store for what's unfolding here on the waters of the Sea of Galilee. But here in this moment, we see this storm. And here in this moment, we see this pushback. And here in this moment, we see the disciples looking at what's going on around them. And listen, if there was any place these disciples felt confident, it would have been on the Sea of Galilee. I mean, a third of them, Peter, Andrew, James, John, they're fishermen. They grew up in and around the city of Capernaum. They grew up on the water. They grew up in one of these fishing boats. They have been on this water since they were old enough to probably even crawl. I mean, so if there's any place they feel confident, anything they feel confident in, it's being on this lake, being in a boat, and navigating the waters of this lake. And you gotta imagine early on as this storm hit, you gotta imagine these guys going, you know what? I got this. You imagine some of the other guys in the boat getting a little nervous and kind of looking around at one another like, is this serious? Should we take this serious? And they're like, oh no, I got this. This is my lane. Don't we do that sometimes? Don't we have areas of our life that we think we've got? Don't we have areas of our life where we think, you know what, I got this. Jesus, you stay in your lane. I got this, man. You stay over there, you handle those problems. I mean, this is like my level problem. I can handle this, Jesus. I'm just gonna stay here. You stay there. I mean, don't we do that sometimes? Sometimes we say, Jesus, you stay over there. I got this. I have complete control. And what we see is Jesus bringing us to the end of ourselves. We see Jesus bringing us to that place of complete and total dependence on him, where we are going to be willing to get in the wheelbarrow. And so many of us have experienced like that verse 24 moment where that seismos level storm hits our life. And the wind and the waves are coming and crashing down. We've been to those moments where everything's going on, and that's exactly where these disciples are. Lightning is crashing around them. Thunder is booming around them. The wind is blowing. The waves are getting bigger and bigger. There they are in the boat. They're soaking wet. Their hair is matted. They're shivering because they're cold, and they're rowing and rowing and rowing to save their lives. I'm sure they're yelling at one another, row faster, row stronger, row, keep rowing, guys, don't give up. And they're screaming, and the scene is intensifying. This moment is intensifying. This desperation is growing and growing and growing. They are freaking out. They are terrified. And where's Jesus? He's asleep. I mean, it simply says, listen to it, it says, Jesus was sleeping. Just a matter of fact. All this is going on, and Jesus is asleep. I mean, these disciples are rowing and rowing and rowing, wearing themselves out, and they finally get to the end of themselves. They finally realize they can't row hard enough, fast enough, strong enough. They finally get to the point where they lose faith in themselves. And here's what's interesting about this. I mean, sometimes we picture this miracle, and we picture the boat that they're on, and we have the wrong image. A couple of years ago, in the city of Tiberias, there was a drought, and they actually were able to uncover a first-century boat, a fishing boat. They call it the Jesus boat. And literally, it's still here today. I think there's a picture on the screen of it. These boats are like 28 feet long, 7 feet wide, and only 3 feet deep. It's like a skiff. At best, it would hold 15 people. And so you have Jesus and his disciples, and so here they are all together. And so Jesus isn't below deck. He's not down in some galley. He's not down in some cushy area. I mean, Jesus is on deck with all of these disciples. He is feeling the wind and the waves that are crashing on him. Jesus is soaking wet, sitting. He's there in the boat, and he is asleep in the middle of this. And so many times in our lives, what we do is we just row and we row and we row and we row, and we realize at a certain point that our strength alone can't calm the storm. That we need help. But it takes our arms sometimes to get really, really tired to admit that we need help and that we need someone more than ourselves in the boat. And what I love about this picture, what I love about this miracle is who is right there in the middle of this miracle, in the middle of this boat with those disciples? It's Jesus. It's Jesus. We're never alone. He is always with us. And sometimes it might feel like Jesus is napping, right? Sometimes it might feel like Jesus is asleep and he's not aware of what is going on, but remember who he is. Remember who is in the boat with you. And you know what I think? I think Jesus might have been playing possum. I think, you know what? I'm like, I find it hard to believe he was like completely asleep. I think this is a great teaching moment, a great lesson that Jesus was intending to teach, to bring these guys to the end of himself. I believe all this is going on, and Jesus is wherever he's sitting or laying in the boat, and he's got that one eye cracked. He's kind of trying to watch them, and he's soaking wet, and he's listening to their screams and listening to their cries, and he's just waiting. He's waiting for that moment where they finally are going to get it. They're finally going to come to the end of themselves. And did you notice what woke Jesus up? What woke him up? It's the cries of his disciples. And so verse 25, listen to what it says. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." And I love what Mark says. Mark records the disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we are going to drown?" Here the disciples are panicking. Jesus is sleeping. They look over and he is asleep. They come over and they wake him up and they ask Jesus a question. Don't you care if we drown? And how many of us have asked Jesus that same question? Jesus, don't you care? Don't you care if my marriage falls apart? Don't you care if my kid comes home? Don't you care if I can start a family? Don't you care if I can beat this addiction? Don't you care if I can overcome this depression? Jesus, don't you care? I mean, how many of us have had that exact same conversation? How many of us have been out on the Sea of Galilee of life, and we've been out there, and the storm winds are raging, the waves are beating against our lives, and we are asking the question, Jesus, don't you care? Wondering if, wondering when he's going to show up. And listen, his disciples, they've been following. They've been following along. They've been watching other people get into the wheelbarrow, and now it's their turn. Now it's their choice to make. What are they going to do? Is their belief going to lead them to action? Is their belief going to put them in the wheelbarrow? Or are they going to cry out still and try to do things on their own? Isn't this how God works? Doesn't God put these, like verse 24 moments, these seismos moments in our lives that just brings us to the end of ourselves, and when we finally get to the end of ourselves, we realize what he's up to? I mean, don't we just look through the Bible and see this over and over again, whether it's, Abraham or Joseph or Moses or David, Peter, the 7 churches of Revelation? Listen, I know it's how it's worked in my life. I know it's how it's been in my life. In fact, you've been with us the last 7 years around this church. You know what me and my family have been through. 7 years ago, wife diagnosed with ovarian cancer. We go through that and we come through that storm, and just weeks later, Dad unexpectedly goes in the hospital, never comes out, dies. At the same time, my father-in-law was diagnosed with terminal cancer. We buried both of them in the exact same week during that summer. We affectionately named that summer the summer of suck in the Cullen house, all right? It was awful. And that summer was also summer I had to put down, 2 of my dad's horses, put down our 15-year family pet. We had to sell a farm. I mean, it was so awful, so overwhelming. It just seemed like we'd never get out of the storm. It seemed like the storm clouds would never break. And then that Christmas Eve, I find myself in the hospital dealing with some unknown illness that's just going to linger and linger for years. 3 months later, COVID. And then even here in the past couple of months, dealing with another crisis in our family with some health issues, and just over and over and over again, feeling like it's relentless. Like the waves are just never going to stop. The storms are never going to stop. But you know what I learned? What I'm still learning through all this? It has expanded my understanding of who Jesus is. It's helped me understand how deep and how wide and how high his love is. I have a deeper faith and a deeper trust in Jesus now than I've ever had before. And I never would be where I'm at without the past 7 years. Never be there. Because I had to experience it. I had to experience it on my own as God has been growing my faith. And what used to be Cat 5 in my life now, it's only some passing rains. Does that mean the storms are gone? The storms aren't big? No, they're still there. But I know who Jesus is, and I know who's in the boat with me. I know he has the power to calm the storm. And so while I don't want to go through those seasons again, here's what I know those seasons do. They grow our faith. Because faith isn't given, faith is grown. Your mom, your dad can't give you a faith. Your grandma, your grandpa can't give you a faith. Your teacher, your small group leader, your pastor cannot give you a faith. Man, listen, we can't get the faith like we need in this room together. We can't get a faith like we need just reading the words of the Bible. We cannot get a faith hearing the stories of other people. We have to experience life and the storms to get the kind of faith that's going to get us in the wheelbarrow. And that's just the reality, and that's the truth of how God works in our lives. But what I love about this is how Jesus is awoken. He's not awoken by the storm. He wakes up because of the cries of his disciples. Save us. Don't you care if we die? And look at Jesus' response. He says, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? You see, when he wakes up, he doesn't do immediately what those disciples want him to do. The first thing those disciples want Jesus to do is calm the storm. Jesus doesn't immediately calm the storm. In the middle of the wind and the waves, the lightning and thunder, they're soaking wet and they're shivering cold. They're wondering if they're going to make it out of this. Jesus doesn't calm the storm in that moment. He uses that moment to go, hey guys, let me ask you a question. What are you afraid of? Where did I tell you we are going? The other side. Yeah, we're still going to the other side. And then Jesus says these words. He says, you have so little faith. Man, you've been watching people who had a wheelbarrow kind of faith. You've watched that leper. You've watched that centurion. You've watched the Peter's mother-in-law. Man, they had getting the wheelbarrow kind of faith. But guys, how about you? You see, Jesus wasn't condemning him. They wasn't criticizing his disciples. In fact, Jesus is using this trigger phrase that we saw him use back in Matthew chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount when he is teaching his disciples about worry. He looks at them and says, hey, you of little faith. And here again, in this moment, he says, you of little faith. He's not criticizing, he's not condemning. He's saying, hey guys, guess what? You got to expand. You got to grow your faith. You need to get in the wheelbarrow kind of faith for what's coming, for the days, the weeks ahead, for the baton I have to hand to you, what's about to happen, what's about to go down. If you don't have a wheelbarrow kind of faith, guys, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So Jesus is saying, expand your faith. The faith you saw in that centurion, the faith you saw in Peter's mother-in-law, the faith you saw in that leper, that's the kind of faith you need. And then in verse 26, it continues, says, then he got up and he rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. On the count of three, let's say calm. 1, 2, 3. Calm. There was a peace. Peace came over the Sea of Galilee. Peace came over the chaos. Mark records that Jesus said 3 words. He said, silence, be still. Like a librarian shushing a bunch of kids in the library who are talking too loud. Jesus stands up and he shushes the enemy and the elements. Quiet, silence, be still. And immediately in that moment, it all stops. The wind, the waves, the lightning, the thunder, the rain, it all stops. In that moment, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, brings order and peace to the chaos. Do you see what just happened? Do you see what Jesus just did and what Jesus is saying in that moment? You know what that moment is? It is a Genesis 1 moment where Jesus, with words, speaks to creation and brings order and chaos, or order and peace to the chaos. And there in that moment, those disciples' eyes are this big around as they recognize who is in the boat with them. Who is in that boat? It's God, the one who brings peace and order to the chaos. And here's the reality. We all want verse 26 in our lives, don't we? We want Jesus to show up and perform a miracle. We want Jesus to show up and calm the storm. We want him to heal. We want him to save our job and save our marriage. We want him to help us start a family. And sometimes Jesus does. But sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't. But just because he doesn't calm the storm doesn't mean he left the boat. Just because he doesn't calm your storm doesn't mean he left the boat. Even if Jesus doesn't do anything about your storm, doesn't mean he has left you alone. His silence does not mean he is absent. He's right there with you, dripping with water in the middle of that storm. In fact, in the very last few hours of Jesus' life, when he just told his disciples that what's about to happen, listen to the words of encouragement he gave them. He says, I've told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Because here on earth, you will have many trials, you will have many storms and sorrows. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. You will have storms. You will have trials. There will be sorrows. And yes, Jesus can command the storms, but sometimes he doesn't. I mean, we see this in his own life, don't we? We see him as he walks towards the cross. He could have stopped that any step of the way. He could have stopped it, but he doesn't stop it. He just continues walking to the cross and gives his life for you and me. And so why is Jesus doing this? Why is this lesson being taught on the Sea of Galilee? He's trying to expand the faith of his disciples, bringing them to the end of themselves so they will have a get-in-the-wheelbarrow kind of faith. And how do his disciples respond? Listen to these last couple of words. Verse 27, it says the disciples were amazed. Say amazed on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Amazed. Who is this man? Who is this, they asked. Even the winds and the waves obey him. Mark records these words. The disciples were absolutely terrified. Say terrified on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Man, their jaws were dropped. Their eyes were as big as saucers. They were in awe. They were amazed. They were terrified. They had a holy fear. This is a burning bush moment. This is a Mount Sinai moment. Who speaks? Who brings peace to this chaos? Who controls the wind and the waves? There is only one, and it is God himself. Who is in the boat with us? It is God. Listen, Jesus performs all kinds of miracles. I mean, we've already seen him, heal the leper and heal the centurion's servant. We've seen Jesus heal Peter's mother-in-law. We see Jesus go on and he heals the blind and heals the cripples. He puts body parts back on when body parts are cut off. He turns water to wine. He feeds 5,000 and 4,000. Jesus raises the dead. He performs all kinds of miracles. But never, never, never do the disciples respond to those miracles like they do this one. I mean, why is this one different? Why is their response different? Miracles authenticate the messenger and the message. And here in this moment, as Jesus does what he does and says what he says, he is authenticating who he is, that he is the God of the universe. And I just wonder, in the middle of this moment, in the middle of the chaos of this storm, did they hear the words of Psalm 107? Some went off to sea in ships, plying the trade routes of the world. They too observed the Lord's power in action. His impressive works on the deepest seas. He spoke and the winds rose, stirring up the waves. Their ships were tossed to the heavens and plunged again to the depths. The sailors cringed in terror. They reeled and staggered like drunkards and were at their wits' end. Lord, help, they cried in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He calmed the storm to a whisper and stilled the waves. I wonder in that moment did they immediately connect the dots. I wonder in that moment they thought of Psalms 89. O Lord, God of heaven's armies, where is there anyone as mighty as you, O Lord? You are entirely faithful. You rule the oceans. You subdue their storm-tossed waves. You see, I believe in this moment, as they asked that question, who is this? They knew the answer to that question because in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of that storm, in the middle of everything that was going on, something became crystal clear to them. They realized who was in the boat with them. It was the God of the universe, soaking wet, sitting there with them in the boat in the middle of the storm. And I wonder in that moment, were they compelled? Did they feel like taking off their shoes because they were on holy ground? Jesus is in the boat. God is in the boat. And so let me wrap up by giving you some takeaways. Actually, just 6 questions. 6 questions to think, 6 questions to ponder. Number 1, are you in the boat? Are you even in the boat? Listen, I look at life. Life is like the Sea of Galilee. Man, we're constantly out there. We're just bobbing around, and we're hoping to keep our head above the water, right? But the beautiful thing we see in what Jesus has done, he's come and he's invited us to get in the boat with him. Are you in the boat? Are you out there paddling, doggy paddling, just trying to keep your head above water, hoping and praying another storm doesn't come because you don't know if you're going to survive the next storm? Jesus is inviting you to get in the boat. Join him in the boat. And maybe you've had one of these seasons. Maybe you've had one of these hard moments of life. And maybe in that moment, Jesus didn't do what you expected him or wanted him to do. And so you decided, you know what? He's not good enough. He's not powerful enough. He doesn't love me. So you crawled out of the boat. Listen, Jesus is inviting you back in the boat. Are you in the boat with him? Second question, how big is your Jesus? Is your Jesus so small that you can control and negotiate with him? Is your Jesus so small that you can keep him in his lane? Or is your Jesus bigger than any storm you face in this life, in this world? How big is your Jesus? Is he bigger than the storms? Is he bigger than your trials? How big is your Jesus? Number 3, what storms do you need to give to Jesus? I mean, we all do exactly what these disciples did. They put their hands on the oars and they just started rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing. And they kept rowing on their own until they couldn't row anymore. And then finally, in that moment of desperation, they cry out for help. And they were exhausted and tired for trying on their own when the God of the universe is sitting the next row over. Jesus says to us, all you who are weary and tired, cast your burdens on me. If you're tired, you've been rowing, what do you need to give to Jesus? He's willing to take it. And number 4, who do you need to invite into the boat? I love this story because these disciples weren't alone. They had one another. There they are in the middle of the storm. There they are going through all this. They had one another. So many times in life, what we love to do is in these moments, we love to find a boat where we're just by ourselves. That's called a dinghy, not a boat. And I think it really kind of is what we are if we try to do that, right? We're dinghy. No, we need a boat. Who are you inviting in as you're going through? As you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with, invite people in the boat. And maybe you got someone in your life right now who's in a storm and they have no one in their boat. Maybe you need to jump out of your boat and get in their boat and help them out. And grab an oar and help them row as they're going through it. Number 5, are you crying out to him? Why do we do this? When we face a trial, we face a storm, why do we do everything in our power to try to beat it on our own? It's like the last-ditch effort as we come to God in prayer. Why do we wait to cry out to him until we have nowhere else to turn? Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for us to cry out first? I think that's part of the lesson here. It's like, man, he's there, he's willing, he's ready. Jesus always responds with compassion when people cry out to him. He's not going to stop today. He's not going to stop no matter what you're facing. He is there. Are you crying out to him? Listen, here's the truth about storms. Jesus can calm the storms. He may not calm the storm, but he still commands the storms. I want you to watch a video. Here's a story of somebody that has walked with Jesus through the storm and found themselves in the wheelbarrow.
I think if I were to summarize my testimony in one sentence, it might be how Jesus transformed my life, my faith, and my relationship with him through prayer. Around the time when I was about 28 years old, I entered a season of grief after the tragic death of my father. With it came a lot of baggage other than grief. It came with guilt, which I struggled with for a long time. It came with anger, bitterness, resentment. And in that time, my heart just shut down. I couldn't feel a thing. I was completely empty. So fast forward about 10 years or so, and my husband and I now are the proud parents of 2 young boys who are now beautiful young men. But we were going through a huge battle in our family. It brought back for me a lot of issues that I have not dealt with from my father's death when he took his own life. And all of a sudden, things resurfaced, and I almost was in panic from worry and being out of control and helpless in the situation that we were now being faced with, and not knowing what to do or who to turn to. The betrayals, the grief, the guilt, the lack of control in a situation, all that started coming back to me. And it really brought me to my knees. And that is when I felt the presence of God just leaning into me and saying, "Daughter, I've heard your prayers. You have asked me, you have sought after me, and the door is open for you. Now just be still and know I am God." And so I stepped back and let him step forward. And boy, the things that started happening. It was then that we really started noticing a lot of changes in our family. And we moved into a place of celebration and rejoicing at the healing that had taken place, fully restored, fully renewed, a new creation life. And looking back now, that time in my prayer closet, realizing the healing that happened, it wasn't just one healing, it was 2. It was mine as well, because I didn't go in asking for healing myself, but that's exactly what he did. Through all of these seasons of my life, as I have learned so much about who God is and prayer and what he has done for us, I find great encouragement to know that wherever we are, in whatever struggle we're dealing with, whatever our journey is that may bring us to our knees, or something we're praying for other people, this evolution of my prayer life and understanding that it's available to everyone. If I could encourage anyone in this church who may be dealing with something right now, to simply give it to God and to come to him in prayer. And I think in that place, you will find the comfort and the grace and the understanding and the wisdom and the strength and the perseverance and everything you will ever need to make it through that storm, because he will be there walking beside you